In the Gun, Episode 5, your new favorite WVU sports podcast, Wes Uhler with the best teammates in the business, the runaway beer truck, Owen Schmitt, and the signal caller, Jed Drenning. It's the episode you've all been waiting for, the good, the bad, the ugly. We'll get to it all here on this edition of ITG when we will recap the Thursday night loss up at Acrisure Stadium to those stinking Pitt Panthers. But first, gentlemen, how we doing?
Owen, looked like you're coming from medieval times there, right? Yeah.
I was just knighted.
There you go. He's got some augured with him there.
Where's the round table?
Got his broadsword. Here in segment 2, he's gonna break out his broadsword.
Funny enough, I am on a round table right now.
There you go. There you go.
Some things you just can't write. You just can't write. We're going to deep dive into everything Pitt recap and reaction here. This episode is brought to you in part by our friends at Toothman Ford, and we all know cars cost less in Grafton. We'll have a full headlines segment for you. We'll get to know the game a little bit more with Jed. We'll revisit some of the predictions that we made last week on Episode 4 ahead of the Backyard Brawl, and, of course, break everything down. We'll get into all those different talking points, the 4th and inches decision, the Bryce Ford Wheaton whoopsie at the end there after an incredible game, everything and all that in between on today's episode of ITG. We'll get to all that in just a minute, but first, a word from our friends at Toothman Ford.
I'm talking with J.R. Toothman of Toothman Ford. J.R., everybody knows a lot of pro athletes buy from you. What's the secret?
Just like Will Greer, future Hall of Famer Frank Gore, James Washington, and many more pros, these guys have financial advisors that are always looking out for them to save time and money, and that's why they always shop at Toothman Ford.
And what if you're like us regular folks that don't have people giving us advice?
You don't need a financial advisor. Toothman Ford will save you time and money no matter who you are. Plus, we'll buy your car even if you don't buy from us. Visit toothmanford.com and get a quick, instant cash offer.
That sounds like a score to me.
That's right, and as always, we'll take anything in trade from chicken wings to Super Bowl rings.
Toothman Ford's got a lot of fans. Here's another one, Dallas Cowboys QB Will Greer.
This is Will Greer, former West Virginia and current NFL quarterback. And cars really do cost less in Grafton at Toothman Ford.
That's a fact, Will. Thanks. You can shop online anytime at toothmanford.com.
Back in the gun here on the Pitt recap. We're going to have a full recap for you in just a few minutes. But first, some headlines and maybe some top WVU stories. And Jed, I know a lot of concern about a couple injuries, I think particularly to a certain all Big 12 corner, Charles Woods. A couple other guys dealing with some knocks and some dings for the Mountaineers. You got any update for us, or are we just kind of in a holding pattern here as we get closer to the game on Saturday?
I'd say it's in a holding pattern. We'll be on the team's timeline. I knew there were some imaging that was going to take place after the fact. I'm sure over the weekend they've gotten a little more clarity from the medical staff, but yeah, both of them were big losses, at least for the duration of the game. But let's hope it's nothing catastrophic for either. But we'll wait and see. But we need both those cats back. We're talking Jordan White. We're talking Charles Woods. So yeah, we're kind of in a holding pattern with that.
No doubt. Yeah, no doubt there. And obviously Charles Woods, a huge one, and that was a big loss at the beginning of the brawl. We'll get into all of that again when we do the full game review here just in a few minutes. We also, a pretty big story around college football, certainly affects the Big 12 and all of college football, and that is that, gentlemen, there is an agreement in place. It has been decided that there will be an expansion, finally, of the college football playoffs, something that's been discussed a lot, rumored plenty over the few years, debated, all these different things. It will be a 12-team college football playoff format that they're saying now will start in 2026. There's some potential that could maybe move up a little bit earlier, but for now it'll be 2026. And real quick, here's just kind of the spark notes, the important need to know, if you will, about this 12-team playoff format. It'll be the 6 highest-ranked conference champions plus the 6 highest-ranked non-conference champions. Your top 4 conference champions, in terms of their ranking, will receive first-round byes. The higher seeds will obviously host the first-round games. Quarterfinal and semifinal matchups will be played in your traditional bowl game formats and at the same locations, and then the title game at a neutral site that'll be changed on a year-to-year basis. Owen, I'll come to you here first on this one, pardon me. this feel a little overdue and inevitable to you that, eventually we would get to this point of playoff expansion?
Yeah, I think it's about time. Obviously, it's going to let the people that should have maybe not been in that top rankings, how the whole ranking systems work, give them an opportunity to play for a national championship instead of just, bye bye bowl game. So I think it's a great thing for the sport. It's going to be great for college football. It brings that March Madness feel to it a little bit. And who doesn't love the playoffs? That's one more big couple games that you get to play to see if you can be a champion or not.
Yeah, Wes, I think a couple interesting points. It was intriguing to me that they almost treated it like a news dump. This was great news, right? I think it's big news, but on a late on a Friday, on a holiday weekend, it was strange that they didn't give this, more of the stage, right? But that's one point. Another point, interestingly enough, just like they discussed before, what this would mean was you get the bye, but you don't get the home field, right? The home field advantage would be enjoyed by the teams in the first round who don't get the bye. That's intriguing. Still, the bye is going to have a lot of value, but it's anything to create parity. I think the word's access. The word is access. Access can save this game. Access can save this sport. And the people who are approaching this saying, "Oh, it's just going to be a bunch of first round or second round blowouts with the number 2 seeded team, blowing the doors off the number 12 seeded team," you're looking at this all wrong. What's happened is the 14 playoff has created super teams. Okay. There's half a dozen or 7 teams, whatever the case might be. It's a very limited number of teams that the most coveted recruits recognize. Look, if I want to play on the biggest stage for the biggest prizes, I have to go to one of these 6 or 7 teams because only these 6 or 7 teams go to the playoffs. So by expanding it to more teams, if you have 12 teams going, that might mean 24 teams have a chance. And now, from a parity standpoint, some of those kids who are flying across the country to go Ohio State or Alabama might stay closer to home since their closer to home team can now actually have a realistic playoff chance. So over the course of time, this should foster some level of parity. It's not going to happen overnight, but what it will do is chip away at what's happened with the creation of these super teams, 6 or 7 teams fostering every kid because they're viewed as the only 6 or 7 with a shot to go to the postseason. So over the course of time, I do think this will create parity as some of those kids, whatever region they might be in, stay closer to home to play for their closer to home team, whatever region.
Yeah, no, I think that's massive. That will, like you said, not right away, but eventually that'll lead to more parity. And the way it's set up now, I think a lot of the conferences have, I don't want to say hogged this thing, but in a way they have. Look at what the SEC's been able to do and getting multiple teams in multiple different years here. That will still happen, but at the same time, you'll have representation from the Big 12 and the ACC and these G5 programs, like Cincinnati and UCF and some others who have been in the conversation or been in the playoff. I think that helps everybody on the recruiting trail. I do think that's a big takeaway from this too, Jed, is that all of a sudden, not just 7, 8, 9 programs can recruit realistically with the pitch of saying, hey, you come here, you're going to have a chance to go to the college football playoff. I mean, right now there's 7, 8, 9 schools that can say that in recruiting and legitimately mean it, where now going forward, there'll be 25, 30 schools that have a chance to say that. If you're Matt Campbell at Iowa State these past couple years, you could say, hey, we're going to go win a Big 12 championship and go to the playoff. That's tangible, I think. Yeah.
And we like to talk about college football having the most meaningful regular season in all of sports, right? Well, that's true, and it's not. How meaningful is the most meaningful regular season when you play 60 games in the final weekend of the year and only 5 or 6 of them have any postseason or playoff implications? Now, all of a sudden, you have a whole lot more meaningful games in the regular season down the stretch, whereas right now it's very limited. But to your point, Wes, you might early on, you might see an SEC Final Four under this new structure. And you know what? That's part of the growing pains of it. I think people by and large will be okay with that so long as they see where this is going. It's not going to get adjusted overnight. But I do think if you grant more programs access to recruit with, saying, hey, come here, we go to the playoffs too. And it's kind of cool because once in a while we actually host a playoff game. Yeah. That's going to draw some of these kids that heretofore have been going to Alabama, have been flying across the country to go Ohio State. I've said it how many times? Bryce Young, starting quarterback at Alabama, Heisman winner, California kid, right? C.J. Stroud, starting quarterback at Ohio State, California kid. It happens so often. Now you might have some of those kids decide, hey, I'm going to stay on the West Coast. I'm going to stay on the East Coast, Northeast, Southwest, whatever it might be. And Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, they're not going to get 90% of these kids. Maybe it goes down to 75 or 80%, whatever it is. But over the arc of time, I see this having an impact.
It's exciting. It is. And now we'll keep an eye on, just to see if they hold firm to that 2026 date, or if there's potentially some movement there as we approach what would be 4 years from now in a 12-team college football playoff expansion. I'm sure that's something we'll talk about more here as we roll along, as the years go by and the falls go down the calendar here on ITG. But for now, it's time to get back into one of our benchmark segments here. You heard this in one of our first episodes. It'll be a reoccurring thing, a reoccurring segment that we do here on this program. It's called Know the Game, where Jed Drenning and Owen, they'll go over obscure rules from college football, different terminology and football lingo, things like that. Jed, for this edition of Know the Game, we've got an obscure rule from the mind of the signal caller, disconcerting signals. What do you got for us?
Disconcerting signals. It makes it even trickier, right?
That's right. Sorry, and I should have said this too real quick at the beginning of the podcast. We're 72 hours since kickoff on Thursday here, and if you can't tell, about 10 minutes into this, I just got my voice back earlier today. Friday I couldn't talk. Saturday I couldn't talk. We're recording this Sunday night. All right, so if any of you doubted my passion out there at Acrisure Stadium on Thursday night, I was doing my part, all right, because I couldn't talk for the last 48 hours.
Got some ad placement with your fisherman's friend here, Wes, right?
There we go.
I popped one before we started tonight, but
disconcerting signals.
Yes, it's disconcerting signals. And strange as that phrase might be, in effect, what it means is obviously when the offense is trying to communicate pre-snap, whether it's the cadence of the quarterback, whether it's communication going on the offensive line, what the defense is not allowed to do is interrupt or mimic that communication. And if the officials catch or suspect the defense in trying to, let's say, mimic the cadence or mimic the O-line's communication with their pass pro calls or whatever else it might be, that's a penalty. And that penalty is called disconcerting signals, that interrupting the communication and the mimicking part of it, okay? Now, it's supposed to be a 15-yard penalty. Now, here's where I first learned about this. When we were doing the prep for the Liberty Bowl against Army, Army's actually a team that's kind of known for this a little bit. Believe it or not, they get pretty good at this on their D line. Okay, a bunch of smart cats up there, so they slip a couple of these things in there. And another point that I've had some experience with it, or at least brushed up against it, was last year in Norman. We all remember that snap in the fourth quarter that Zach Frazier had, that unfortunate snap, right? Well, there was a lot of chatter going on with the Oklahoma D-line throughout the course of that second half. So a lot of people were upset, thinking that throughout the course of that second half, Oklahoma should have been zinged for this. And had they been zinged for it and flagged for it, maybe that snap would have never happened. But actually the other night at Acrisure Stadium, you might have seen, I think it was in the second quarter, Pitt was flagged for delay of game, okay? Defensively, they were flagged for delay of game. And what happened in that circumstance, apparently they kicked really hard into a stem movement, but I was almost under the impression, based on what was being said, that they were also saying something verbally. And that's kind of the impression I was under when that flag happened. And so I walked away thinking, when the official, I even said it on the broadcast, I asked Tony, I'm like, Tony, I don't understand why that would be delay of game, okay? If in fact there's communication going on, it's not a 5-yard delay game penalty. There's a flag dedicated just to that, and it's called disconcerting signals if that's what happened. And if so, it's a 15-yard penalty. But something to just keep in your pocket. It's not that often you'll encounter it, but I just wanted our fans to know it's out there. The defense is obviously allowed to communicate too. All right. And this is somewhat of a subjective rule. There's so many subjective rules in football, whether it's pass interference, whether it's targeting. We've seen that how many times now, even recently, right? Well, this is somewhat subjective too. It's not that the defense can't communicate, but if the officiating crew is under the impression or gets the sense that communication is designed to mimic or disrupt the offense's communication and draw them off sides, that's when the penalty comes in. But I heard Narduzzi complaining after the game. All we were doing was stemming our D line, kicking our D line. I've never seen that called a penalty. So I wasn't on the field. I was off the field. So I have no idea what was actually happening out there, but it was enough to warrant at least a delay of game penalty from the officiating crew on the Pitt defense.
It's funny that you brought this up. We had our game Friday night, and we had 3 false start penalties. We were bringing motion in from the outside, and our tackle jumped off twice, right? Well, we ended up replacing him with another tackle. Okay. He jumped off the 3rd time. And what was happening was, as that guy was coming across, they were yelling, motion, motion, motion. And I think a couple other things that the kids were telling me sounded more like hut. And that was why he was jumping off sides. Now, obviously, we know we train our kids to, see the ball, move on movement. But that is something funny here because I didn't know what the signal caller was going to call this podcast. So what a coinkydink, right? What a coinkydink.
So now Greenbrier West could be coached up to avoid it, right?
But yep. Now I'll be able to coach him up, Jed.
The old
now, I've had that situation happen on some the NFL teams that I had played with, involved with a couple of those before. But that is something that we all have to look out for. I mean, it does get in the heat of the game. Jed, like I mean, those guys get pretty tricky with what's going on up front. So things are said all the time.
One thing I used to notice early in my career, Owen, and I'll leave it with this because, Wes, I'll toss it back to you. Early in my career as a quarterback, I recognized that by and large, of course, there's exceptions to anything, but the more communication I heard going on defensively in the 2nd and 3rd levels between the backers and the DBs, the more I recognized, all right, they're probably in zone coverage. That's a tip-off. Whereas if you're locked in on man, sometimes there's communication, but not nearly as much. Okay, the extent of it goes down. But so anyway.
That's another keen observation there from the eyes and the ears of the signal caller. No, that's good. That's good stuff. I like that too. Disconcerting signals. I knew that was a penalty. I knew that the defense couldn't be, like Owen was sharing from Friday night. You can't be screaming out hike and things like that and trying to trick the offense in that regard. I didn't know that it had a fancy name, though, and that is why we get to know the game with the signal caller. Disconcerting signals, your lesson this time around. We're going to take another break here. When we come back on the other side, we'll get into some game recaps. We'll take a look at some of the predictions we made last week as well, see what we got right and wrong there. We'll do all that after this message from GoMart.
Game day got you on the go? We get it. GoMart is here to keep you going all season long with stores throughout our home state. We're a proud West Virginia-owned company, and our friendly staff is committed to serving our communities. From fuel to freshly brewed coffee and snacks, a stop at GoMart to cover your game day needs is always a touchdown. Plus, GoMart Rewards members earn points with each purchase to redeem for discounts on gas and free items. So stop by, start saving, and stay on the go with GoMart.
Back in the gun, Wesley Uhler, Owen Schmitt, Jed Drenning here. It's episode 5, the Pitt recap. We are going to deep dive into everything that transpired on Thursday night at Acrisure Stadium. But quickly, before we get there, we've got to recap some of the predictions that we made last week. We did some bigger picture, taking a look at some scores around some of the big games of the week in the Big 12 as well, too. We made some of our own individual predictions. Jed, we'll start with the bigger picture, the game recaps, and you laid out a fun a predictor segment, right? Not predictions, maybe projections is the better word to use there. What Vegas thinks we think, and came out with some potential outcomes for big games across the country this past weekend. And I got to tell you what, partner, I mean, you're pretty good here. I'm starting to wonder if you're maybe in the room with some of these Vegas guys when they're making these spreads and everything. Because if you take a look at some of the projections that we had, and I say Owen and I will take credit here, but it was mostly you. Some of these are 1 point off, 2 points off, pretty spot on.
I'm not reinventing the wheel. I mean, all that's happening here is, again, when you explore how Vegas comes up with a point spread. They put together power rankings for teams, compare it to other power rankings. They take several steps in doing that. But like I said, this isn't a gambling show. I'm not a gambling guy. Point spreads fascinate me as an indicator, right? So what I did was I took the point spreads and I took the over under, and I just tried to come up with the closest approximation of a football-ish, that's the word I use, football-ish score. So when you look at, for instance, you guys watching on YouTube can see the graphic. You guys and gals out there checking the show out on YouTube, you can see the graphic on screen. But for those of you listening, I'll give you an example. Our projection we made last week for Cincinnati at Arkansas was a 28-23 Arkansas win. Well, in reality, Arkansas won that game 31-24. Okay. Our projection was Utah winning 27-24 in the Swamp. What actually happened? They lost 29-26. The same type of game. In other words, that's Vegas was right in the sense that if that's what they're after, that was the type of game they got, even though Utah lost instead of won. The one that was surprising was probably the beatdown, the unilateral beatdown. That, I mean, Georgia was a heavy favorite, don't get me wrong, against Oregon, but the projection was more in the 35-17 Georgia win kind of area. And as it turned out, you guys, 49-3. So Dan Lanning, the former Georgia head coach, the former Georgia D coordinator, is now the head coach at Oregon. He got knocked 6 ways to Sunday. It looked to me like he was trying to play Georgia-style football without Georgia-level football players, and obviously that didn't work. There's going to be a curve there for him, but that's the only one in terms of our score approximations. Notre Dame, Ohio State, less scoring than a lot of people felt. I don't know if it was the same type of game. The projection was 38-21 Ohio State. The score was 21-10, but this is a fun little exercise. Just we project, and then we check and see how close the projection was. What type of game was it?
Yeah, that Georgia-Oregon game was a surprise to me. I thought Georgia would win comfortably. I thought we'd get to the fourth quarter and it wouldn't really be. It's not like the result would be hanging in the balance or anything, but it's a tough spot for Oregon. I mean, you're going down into Georgia. I know it's technically labeled a neutral site game, right? But you're playing in the state of Georgia.
In Atlanta. I mean, who could possibly beat Georgia in Atlanta, right?
Yeah, no one on this show would know anything about that. Oh, wait. Oh, yeah, that's right. The beer truck. Yeah. But yeah, that game felt over about 5 or 6 minutes into that thing. It was clear. All right, one of these animals is not like the other.
It was clear. Not only is this thing over, but it's not going to be 35-17 like the projection was, right? Yeah, right, Owen.
Yeah, it was a blowout. I was shocked watching the game. Georgia looks fast, man.
Yeah,
I mean, they looked like they were playing a low-level D1 team.
They got Groot at tight end. I mean, that kid.
Oh.
Did you see that kid? 6'7",
running people over,
260?
hurdling people. My goodness, looked like Owen against Rutgers.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And then Jed, I tell you what, I mean, if you think some of those projections from the bigger games across the country were pretty spot on, if we'll pull up the graphic here now for our Big 12 projections as well too, I mean, these might even been closer.
Yeah, this was a little crazy. Again, for those of you watching on YouTube, you can check it out right there. On one column was the projection we made last week, and the other side is the actual score as it turned out. Oklahoma State, I'll tell you what we learned in that game, we projected a 40-17 win over Central Michigan. It didn't turn out that way. It was 58-44. So Oklahoma State, we learned there is obviously Mike Gundy can pivot with the best of them. They're going to be a much different football team. They couldn't run the ball and they couldn't stop anybody the other night against Central Michigan, but they couldn't be stopped either. They were throwing it all over the yard with Spencer Sanders, so they're back to that. Completely different football team than what we saw a year ago. Then one of the earlier games, you saw TCU traveling to Colorado. The projection was 34-23 TCU. As it turns out, they won 38-13. Interesting. Sonny Dykes didn't throw the ball a lot there. So, but anyway, yeah, TCU won easily as the projection suggested. It gets fun when you start looking at the Oklahoma projection and the Texas projection. We projected Oklahoma against UTEP as a 44-13 winner. That was our projection last week. What happened? We projected 44-13. The score was 45-13. So that projection was pretty close. Yeah, that projection was pretty close. And in Texas with Louisiana Monroe against the Fighting Terry Bowdens and Chase Allcars, we projected a 52-14 Texas win. That was our projection last week, 52-14. The actual game score was 52-10. So again, fun exercise, just following the numbers. I'm not doing anything magic here. I'm following the point spread, going with the over-under, and trying to come up with a football-type score. Sometimes you get close on them.
Yeah, it's crazy to see how close those games or how close those scores were. I mean, obviously, just shaved a few points here and there. But Jed, I'm gonna have to start putting you on FanDuel, son. I'm gonna
Seriously.
here.
Well, if
Well-
you're going to put me on a site, let's make it that one.
Yeah.
FanDuel and not only fans.
There you go.
Sorry, I digress.
There you go.
I'm
Oh,
sorry.
oh,
I'm
whoa,
sorry.
whoa,
That was a
whoa,
horrible
Whoa,
sentence.
whoa, hey! I know about your calendar with the
I was
Seahawks.
I was just gonna say I've still got Owen's rookie calendar running through my mind. So you know what? Before we toot our horn too much, though, while we might have been pretty close and spot on with some of those, in terms of our own individual picks and projections for some of the things that that we wanted to call our shot on across the Big 12, and not so much. 0 for 3, gentlemen. None of us doing so hot. I'll come to you first, Jed. We'll start, of course, every week Jed's going to predict his Big 12 signal caller of the week, which will be which quarterback in the conference has the most passing yards in that particular week. And Jed, rightfully so, I think, went with JT Daniels. But as you just mentioned, not everything going perfectly for Oklahoma State, but one thing that they certainly were able to do against Central Michigan was throw the football.
That's right. Now, in our defense, there's few things more difficult than going against the entire field. So what we're trying to do is pick one player out of all of them and say that player is going to produce more yards, in my case, through the air, than any other player. So last week I went so far as I had the graphic built to submit to our producer with Spencer Sanders' name on the graphic, right? And then the more I thought about it, okay, Neil makes it official, so I can roll with Neil with JT against Pitt. And I liked the matchup. I know he's going to get plenty of chances. And again, that wasn't a homer pick. # not a homer. I liked the matchup. But as it turns out, Spencer Sanders led all Big 12 passers with 406 yards, in part because he had to do what I wasn't sure he'd have to do, and that's play the whole game against Central Michigan. Central Michigan, dragged them into a rock fight. Number 2, you have to drop all the way down to 293 yards. Hunter Decker's Iowa State debut, great debut by Hunter Deckers. There's a lot of buzz about Hunter Deckers replacing, a franchise level player out there in Brock Purdy. So number 3, you drop down to 233 yards. Dylan Gabriel, as you expected at Oklahoma, is going to fit right in, it looks like. And then dropping down to number 6, JT was tied for number 6 with 214 yards. But I'm going down with my guns blazing here. I think that was a decent pick, and I'd make it again.
I think so too. Owen, how you feeling about your prediction? Of course, every week Owen will bring us his runaway beer truck of the week, which same concept, just which running back will have the most rushing yards. Owen went with Devin Neal of Kansas. Close. He was third most in the conference, Owen, but what they say, close only matters in horseshoes and hand grenades, partner.
Yeah, that's what they say. That is an old wives' tale. Deuce Vaughn, right? South Dakota. Obviously, I thought Devin was going to have a better matchup versus Tennessee. They did put the spanking on him, but he comes up with 126. Deuce Vaughn against South Dakota had a nice little game. Second, never would have predicted this, obviously, because came out of kind of nowhere here, right? And that's our boy with 125 on the ground. CJ McDonald, that's versus Pitt, obviously. We all saw that in action. That was beautiful. I hope we get to see him get some more touches here for the season. Definitely be thinking about him going forward. And then my boy coming in, Devin Neal against Tennessee Tech with 108. Could have got there. Not close enough.
We're going to be keeping score throughout the year. We're all 0-1. Okay, so we're going to keep our standings. At some point in a later episode, we'll have standings on the screen. We're not ready for that yet, but go ahead, Wes.
Now we'll start. Hey, we'll be in the same boat as the Mountaineers, right? We'll start 0-1, 11 opportunities to claw ourselves out of this. We'll get it moving in the right direction. Yeah, but so I'm tasked with predicting the Big 12 defense of the week, which defensive unit across the conference will surrender the most points in a given week. Fewest points, pardon me. And we wouldn't want to give an award for surrendering the most points. That wouldn't make any sense.
Well, that'd be interesting, too.
That would be interesting.
That might be just as fun.
In this conference, that might be a good time. Which defense will be the stoutest? Which defense, will give up the fewest amount of points on a week-to-week basis? I went with Baylor. Not bad. They tied for second, but there was a shutout. No, pardon me. Yeah, no, there was a shutout. Yes, as you'll see here on the graphic, Kansas State against South Dakota, allowing a big goose egg. Were the Wildcats there? So, yeah, Jed, that'll take the cake because you can't get any better as a defense than 0.
I was kind of tracking the game because after I was 0-1, I kind of wanted you guys to be 0-1. And so I kind of got excited when the Great Danes of Albany scored in the early part of the game against Baylor. I said, yeah,
I'm sure you did.
Go Great Danes. But they didn't get much after that early touchdown. So they were held to 10s. You weren't far off.
I'll tell you what's crazy. I really thought my boy was going to take it off. He had 4 carries for 108 yards.
Yes, he did.
I mean, I'm thinking, man, are they going to give him the ball a little bit more?
That's Noel Devine against Maryland numbers.
Yeah,
I tell you what. Here's what's good news. Jalen Daniels for Kansas, the quarterback. We'll get into this here in a later episode later in the week, but same type of thing. He was incredibly efficient, 15 of 18. It's been a long time since Kansas handled business against an FCS team and dispatched them as quickly as Kansas did the other night. That's a sign one more small sign that's the program on the verge of turning a small corner under Lance Leipold. But they played a good football game. Did what you're supposed to do to Tennessee Tech.
Yep, absolutely. Take care of business.
A wise man, Tunch Ilkin, former Steelers offensive lineman and part of the Steelers radio broadcast crew for 30 years. Tunch once told me, if you can't beat the stiffs, that means you are a stiff. Yeah. So Kansas taking care of some stiffs there. Maybe they're not where they want to be, but maybe they're not quite a stiff anymore, a doormat anymore either. Certainly.
You guys ever been to Cookeville, Tennessee? We played Tennessee Tech when I was playing for Terry and Jimbo at Sanford. It's a cool little college town. Yeah.
Yeah, no, certainly too. Kansas will be looking taking a deeper dive into everything the Jayhawks have going on later on in the week when we get to episode 6 for our preview. It's time for one more break here. When we come back, though, it will be a full Pitt recap. We'll get into to everything that transpired on Thursday night, some of the things that the coaching staffs have said since then, and anything and everything in between. We will fully dive into the brawl when we return here. Wes Uhler, Jed Drenning, Owen Schmitt. But first, these words from Toothman Ford.
I'm talking with J.R. Toothman of Toothman Ford. J.R., everybody knows a lot of pro athletes buy from you. What's the secret?
Just like Will Greer, future Hall of Famer Frank Gore, James Washington, and many more pros, these guys have financial advisors that are always looking out for them to save time and money, and that's why they always shop at Toothman Ford.
And what if you're like us regular folks that don't have people giving us advice?
You don't need a financial advisor. Toothman Ford will save you time and money no matter who you are. Plus, we'll buy your car even if you don't buy from us. Visit ToothmanFord.com and get a quick, instant cash offer.
That sounds like a score to me.
That's right. And as always, we'll take anything in trade from chicken wings to Super Bowl rings.
Toothman Ford's got a lot of fans. Here's another one, Dallas Cowboys QB Will Greer.
This is Will Greer, former West Virginia and current NFL quarterback. And cars really do cost less in Grafton at Toothman Ford.
That's a fact, Will. Thanks. You can shop online anytime at ToothmanFord.com.
Back in the gun. This is the 5th episode of your new favorite WVU podcast, the Pat White episode, huh? How about that here of ITG? Wesley Uhler with the best teammates in the business, Jed Drenning, Owen Schmitt. Jed, I'm going to come to you here first. Post-game pressers, and obviously I always think after the first game of the year, I like to hear what the coaches have to say, particularly after an emotional, a massive game like the one that we had on Thursday night. Anything that Neil said post-game, I know obviously, you're there on the sideline. You were sharing with us some difficulties with the on-field interview, but anything that he said maybe in that portion or in his post-game presser that stood out or you thought was noteworthy to you?
Well, it was obviously a crazy environment immediately following the final gun. And, I'm walking with Neil up for the handshake with Coach Narduzzi. And then Neil is concerned in that environment. Any host of things could break out at any point, whether it's players, whether it's fans, you're in that type of setting. You're going through the student section to get back to the locker room. So he had to keep his eye on a lot of moving parts there. And I just kept telling him, I was like, take your time, make sure you do what you got to do. And we made our way up into the corridor. We actually kind of got disrupted with our transmission, but But it was a tough time. But when you listen to his post game presser, which we had on our post game show in Learfield, uh, of course you got to be somewhat diplomatic. Okay, there's filters you have to shoot some of these things through. Uh, there's a balance to be struck somewhere between people recognizing, look, you weren't happy with how things played out from an officiating standpoint, but at the same time, the officials don't cost you the game. Okay, lack of execution, some misguided decisions. Those are always what cost you football games. Okay, but in large measure, I think he handled it fairly well in terms of the circumstances. He was asked about the 4th and 1. Uh, whether you agree with it or not, that's another discussion. But he gave his explanation for it. Okay. And it was a sound explanation. I mean, there's two schools of thought as to why you would or why you wouldn't right there. And his explanation for not doing it, he explained it pretty well. That doesn't mean you have to agree with it. But so that was what came from Neil's sound. And then, of course, I heard Narduzzi's post-game remarks, but we made a conscious decision not to choose or include those in our post-game show at the stadium. He sounded way too much like Pat Narduzzi to want to subject the world to that. So, but anyway, Owen, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, he's our coach, right? He's our leader. We gotta be respectful of the decision. Obviously, as fans, you don't want to let that slip. There's many plays in the game where we could have won that play that would have forced us not to be in that situation. So to boil it down to one thing is hard to do. Obviously, it was a major point in the game. Um, and that was some of the stuff from last year that we would like to kind of move on from, in my opinion, as far as the team goes. But I mean, it's ride or die, right? Players, coaches, fans. He's the coach. He's the play caller. Whether or not they had a conversation, I mean, Graham wanting to go for it. Neil made the decision. Uh, Not bad. I thought they could have maybe done some, tried to make him maybe jump off sides. Maybe want to maybe call a timeout there in that situation. But I mean, it is what it is, and a lot of great things happen in that game. It's a tough loss. It's a tough one to swallow just because I feel like we kind of gave it away. But going forward, some small fundamental stuff we need to work on, and then just making the plays when big big name players make big plays in big games. So we just need to make sure that we're focusing on that stuff. And this week of practice, have a great week of practice, and we'll go for there. We got Kansas, baby.
Mm-hmm.
Jed, I really liked what JT Daniels said after the game. I was obviously, when I finally emerged from the rubble like a dejected villain in a Batman movie, when I finally emerged from the rubble on Friday morning, one of the first things that I wanted to do was, all right, well, what did JT have to say after the game, right? And hey, obviously it's a press conference. He's played in a lot of big games. He's been a kid that, as Jed has outlined before here on this podcast, he's been in the spotlight since he was in high school at Mater Dei, one of the biggest high school football programs in the country, being the most touted recruit and reclassifying and going to college early and all these things. He knows how to handle these situations, good or bad, high or low, win or loss, right? He's got a lot of practice at being at a podium in kind of crucial moments. But I liked a lot of what he said, particularly I wrote this down here. One of the things that JT closed with in his post-game presser was, and I quote, "I think of all the things you can fix on a week-to-week basis, execution is one of them. Culture and fighting like a team of fighters, you can't fix that, and this team can fight. There's a lot to be very optimistic about with this team," end quote. He could have gone a million different ways there, but I think he wanted to shoot some confidence into his teammates that, hey, I know we're going to be dejected. I know this one hurts, and I know this one, no matter how the rest of the season plays out, this one will sting no matter what. But we're going to fight. You can't fix that. You can't fix the attitude we have. We'll clean up the things that we need to fix, and we'll be ready to go moving forward. That's what you want from your five-star, your quarterback leader. And I think early on, it's one game, but both from what we saw on the field and what we saw intangibly off the field, pretty clear JT Daniels, I think, is the guy that we all thought and hoped that he would be.
I want to be giving JT a lot of love in our next segment, but I'll say this here. He checks every box of being a big time quarterback. And one of those boxes is what you say and how you handle the media in times of adversity. That's part of the job. That comes from straight from the job description. And just as you hit on, Wes, it's almost as if you couldn't script a better response in times of adversity with what he was suffering through than what he said to rally his teammates. There was another point in the post-game presser where someone from the Pittsburgh media tried to get him to take the bait, tried to get him to throw Bryce Ford Wheaton under the bus. He was having none of it. This isn't his first rodeo. As a matter of fact, he took umbrage to that. That's his teammates you're talking about, and went right back at the guy. So he checks every box. Oh, and you know it. You know what makes you respond as a teammate to Pat White, right? You know what Pat White does, okay, other than make plays, the things he says or his conduct. You know he has your back. I mean, JT understands. Look, that's what makes these guys fight for you. And job number one of a quarterback is to make everybody around you, and I don't just mean the 10 guys on offense, everybody around you better. That is the mark of an elite quarterback. First, second, and third, make everybody around you better. I'm convinced that's what he's going to do. And in part, it's stacking pennies with comments like that, and it's the performance on the field.
Yeah, I mean, spoken like a true competitor. Obviously, those press conferences can be quite annoying after a loss, and having to deal with the press and just all the BS that they throw at you. Commend him for stepping up for Bryce there. I mean, things go either way. You know what I mean? That's what happens in games like that. Uh, that guy's got a long-standing history of football in his family. He's a player. He's gonna come out this week. He's gonna take it personal. He's gonna work in practice. And I don't mean to make it just about him. I know I caught some flack on Twitter. I was, 20 beers deep, uh, putting tweets out like, "Man, we got to catch the ball." It's not just on him. It's just that's a passionate thing, you know what I mean, that I had posted out there. But yeah, we know that's how it goes. And as far as JT, I mean, excellent game. I mean, I was so thrilled with where he was putting these dimes. I mean, putting his receivers in situations to catch the football, putting the football in situations where nobody was going to catch the football but our receivers, keeping them out of harm's way. He took some shots, still made the ball fly, stepped in the pocket really pretty on a few plays, and made it happen. And like I said, getting back to the original question here, as far as his poise, true competitor. I can't wait to see how they respond to this week.
Yeah, I'm with you, no doubt, and that'll happen, of course, Saturday night, 6 o'clock against Kansas at home. Again, we'll have a full Jayhawk preview episode for you later on in the week. I did want to before we continue this game recap, Jed. Anything that you wanted to share with us? You obviously, you're privy. You've got a pretty unique view being on the sideline for all these things. Anything you want to share with us, specifics about something you saw in the field, something that happened on the trip, any behind the scenes or path less traveled nuggets that you got for us here?
Our debut of our At the 50, and you guys feel free to pitch in, but yeah, there were a number of things I found interesting. First, it was pretty apparent when I left the press level where I did the first 2 or 3 hours of the pregame and made my way down to the field. I migrated down to field level. I get down there as the team's warming up. It was very apparent that this was a star-studded affair. I mean, it was a big-time atmosphere. I mean, you had everybody from Tony Dorsett to Rasheed Marshall to Pac-Man Jones. I mean, both sides had the luminaries, right? And then, of course, game day was set up right below our bench. And so the game day crew, they had nothing else to do once kickoff came. So they watched the game with us, right? Outside the box, on the edge of the box. So the better part of the first and second quarter, I was either with, Herb Street and Coach, or with Pollock and Desmond. So they were kind of, and Reese Davis, they were all mingling around. But everywhere you turned, There were personalities. There were media types. But probably my high point of the evening, and it's just because I'm such a horrible person. Pitt
Oh,
has
I like where this is going.
Pitt has a ball boy, okay, and he's a ball boy, much like Cosmo Kramer was a ball boy at the tennis match, right? Okay, you remember Kramer as the ball boy running out? Okay, that comes to mind. So this guy's probably my age. Okay, if I had to guess, I'm terrible at playing that game, but so he's maybe 50, but he has like Ted Knight, snow white hair, right? So he looks like he's 65, but I know he's not. He might be younger than me. Okay, he might be in his 40s. Well, he has the good fortune. His job description keeps him as the Pitt ball boy on our sideline because you guys know how this works. We got ball boys on their sidelines, they got ball boys on ours, and the officiating crew, every time they got to replace the ball, they throw it in, and that's their job. So they got to make their way up and down our sideline, okay, pretty seamlessly. And that's all they're supposed to do is just kind of keep your head down, shut up, toss the ball in and out. There's an etiquette that's supposed to be attached to this job, right? Well, apparently that guy missed school the day they taught that etiquette at ball boy school, okay? Because every time Pitt would make a big play, he would have his back acting as though he didn't know what was happening. His back to one of our coaches or one of our players. It didn't matter if it was Neil or Matt Moore or JT, whoever it might be, jumping up and down like an idiot. Okay. And again, this is tantamount to, it's not just like yelling in the press box, which, Wes, you know the deal there, right? You don't cheer in the press box, right? It goes beyond that. This is almost, it's not like sneezing at a buffet. It's open mouth sneezing at a buffet. Okay. That's what this guy was doing. Right. So fast forward to the end of my story. This guy, after 2.5 full quarters of doing, I mean, if I'd have had a stick, I might not be here right now. I mean, all I had that was a short little mic. How much damage is that going to do? Right. So 2.5 quarters of doing this, we're midway through the third quarter, a play spills out of bounds. And I'm convinced the football gods had their strings pulling on every movement on that play because that play destroyed him. He went flying, his glasses went flying, his hat went flying, both balls went flying and the footballs. All right. So he just went sailing and he's laying there and it took him, 90 seconds to recover. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm such a horrible person because I enjoy this so much. And of course he was just fine. But so that was.
You're not a horrible person. You're just a human being.
Anyway, I got more satisfaction out of that than I probably should, but he was just fine. And he was back to doing it later in the game. But so it's the things you see on the sidelines, but and I'll get to something else I saw on the sidelines later about JT's toughness, but that'll come in the recap.
And that story doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, what's the oldest adage in sports, right? Attitude reflects leadership. And look at the leadership of the Pitt football program. The dude who takes the opportunity as soon as the game's over to, ESPN disrespect. Let me thump my chest about how rude ESPN was to us. Forget the fact that they gave you the prime time kickoff game on a Thursday night. Forget the fact that they brought college game day there to Acrisure Stadium. And, of course, forget the fact that Louis Riddick, a former Pitt football player, was on the damn call of the broadcast. Yes, so disrespectful by ESPN. When you got a jackass head coach, it's no wonder you've got a quarterback who's saying F West Virginia, and you got a team who's blowing kisses to WVU as we walk off the field, and you got a ball boy who's an asshole. Yeah, that's the least surprising thing I've heard all week. Not that I'm still fired up about my past with Pat Narduzzi or anything.
I'm sure these things are happening in Tuscaloosa. Right?
Listen, I'm not an overly religious person, all right, but like I grew up going to church with my parents and these things. I know that there's a passage in the Bible that says God opposes the proud and gives grace to the humble. Well, as it relates to Pat Narduzzi, I'm just waiting for God to oppose the proud, damn it.
Wes is fired up, son. Get you some, boy. Man, we need a beer sponsor. We need to calm you down, son.
It's been too much throat coat green tea over here to try and get my vocals back to where they need to be. Not enough booze to calm me down. I need some of those gummies, Owen.
It is an unspoken rule, man. I mean, yeah, you might be a part of that program, but at the same time, you're basically just a bystander. It is pretty disrespectful, in my opinion. But hey, karma's a bitch, right?
He's not on their sidelines, he's on ours. And I'm sitting there asking myself, how would I conduct myself on the opponent's sideline? I mean, first it would feel unnatural to be there, but I'd surely
Try and blend in and not stand out if you were there.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's just a common respect, just a
Yeah.
common
Well, again,
respect.
attitude reflects leadership, and when your leadership has no respect, why should the ball boy? It's a trickle down effect there, without a doubt. We got to get to one more break here. When we come back on the other side, some more specifics, some good, some bad, some ugly. We'll give our pivotal moments, all these things as we continue to recap the backyard brawl.
Real quick,
Yep,
Wes.
yep.
Let me clarify. If you were watching the game, there were two circumstances where a play spilled out of bounds. One was a completely innocent elderly photographer. That was a terrible, terrifying circumstance down outside the other side of the box. I don't want people that watch the game confusing things, thinking, "Wow, Jed was feeling good about Grandpa." No, not that guy. Okay, because that was horrible. I mean, we were all helping him up, and it was all he could do to be out there snapping good pictures, right?
Appreciate
This
the
wasn't
clarity.
that guy. But no, I didn't mean to interrupt. But go ahead.
I appreciate the clarity. No, that's important because we don't need anybody coming after us with any accusations here. Wes Uhler, Jed Drenning, Owen Schmitt, more game recap, good, bad, ugly, pivotal moments when we return on the other side. You are in the gun.
Game day got you on the go? We get it. GoMart is here to keep you going all season long with stores throughout our home state. We're a proud West Virginia-owned company, and our friendly staff is committed to serving our communities. From fuel to freshly brewed coffee and snacks, a stop at GoMart to cover your game day needs is always a touchdown. Plus, GoMart Rewards members earn points with each purchase to redeem for discounts on gas and free items. So stop by, start saving, and stay on the go with GoMart.
ITG in the gun here, episode number 5. Make sure you're following along with all of us on all your social media channels at In the Gun Podcast. That's where you can find us on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. Subscribe on YouTube if you want to see our beautiful mugs and get the video element of these podcasts as well, too. We'll have different polls, interactive stuff that we do on social media throughout the weeks. So make sure you're getting locked in for a exciting season, an exciting year of coverage here for WVU football. Gentlemen, we're going to get into the good and the bad here in just a second. But first, our final kind of follow-up to some of these projections. How close did Vegas come? I tell you what, Jed, once again here, not too far off.
Yeah, from a point spread standpoint, we just went with the spread being 7. As you can see on the graphic, or if you're listening, we can walk you through it. We projected again, it's not our prediction. We weren't saying Pitt's going to win 28-21. We were saying after feeding the point spread and the over-under into a calculation, a football-ish score was going to be in the ballpark of 28-21. Well, it was that type of game in the sense that it was a one-touchdown game, but there was more scoring. And, of course, you're factoring a pick six into that. You're factoring a blocked punt into that. So, take away the pick six and the blocked punt, which you can predict those things. Maybe Vegas was closer than they even thought with both sides of it, the over-under and the spread. But 38-31, the final score, the projection 28-21. So that's how that unfolded.
We'll keep an eye on that, obviously, next week, too, when we give some more of those in our Kansas preview episode. Owen, the good, the bad, the ugly, what stands out to you, partner? We've had a couple days here now to digest this before we hit the record button on this episode. What's burning in your mind here still, about 72 hours or so after kickoff?
A couple costly penalties, some that I didn't really think were kind of on us. I know we had some personal foul penalties early in the game. That's kind of to be expected, but I didn't think they were flagrant penalties. I thought they were just getting after it a little bit, which was unfortunate that we got called for them. But that's going to happen. It's a passionate game. It's a passionate sport, and backyard brawl. I mean, that's what it's all about. So that was a little bit unfortunate. And then obviously the tip ball at the end of the game. I mean, we had the Mo right there, the big mo, and that's what you need when you're trying to seal a deal. Like I said, unfortunate play. And then we get coached as offense, obviously you have a bunch of big uglies on the field. So when there is a turnover, you usually rely on those skill guys to make a play. And unfortunately, we just weren't in position, and it resulted in a pick six. So that's kind of my thought process on that. Unfortunate. Hey, penalties we can fix, right? Penalties we can fix. You know what I mean? Keep your composure, be poised, um, and then just see the ball into the tuck, right? That's a fundamental thing we just need to work on, and I know they will. They're all true competitors, and that was very apparent on Thursday night.
Jed, is that where your mind goes to? Maybe to too many mistakes, too many penalties. You and I said before we started recording this, that it still feels like more of a WVU loss than a Pitt win. Is that part of that? I think too, some crucial missed tackles in the second half. I think particularly in the third quarter and there towards the end. Two turnovers, and Pitt ends up getting 14 points off those two turnovers. What's sticking in your craw here on this Sunday night as we record this, Jed?
As far as the bad,
Yes, sir.
right? Okay. Yeah, the turnovers, in any environment, particularly in an environment like that one was, as emotionally charged as that environment was. We knew the margin for error was going to be a narrow one against a quality football team like that. You can't hand them plays. Now, the guys that were involved in those turnovers also made plays for us, but you can't be doing that in any circumstance, but especially in an environment like that one. The penalties, yeah, I agree, Owen. And to me, part of it was in going back and studying this game, watching it on tape and scrutinizing it. That's just what I do. I was reminded of what I was reminded of through the course of the summer and doing preparation and watching tape on Pitt all summer. And that is how talented Pitt is in their front seven. Their defensive line is exceptional. I think they got some special linebackers. And as much as I hate to give an inch to Pat Narduzzi, they're incredibly well coached. Their technique is exceptional. The way they chop up the front and play the stunt game, they sacrifice themselves for their teammates to create clear paths to the passer. It is very, very difficult to create or much less maintain, especially maintain a clean pocket against this group. So this was a tremendous challenge for the West Virginia offensive line. And part of that resulted in some of these penalties. We only gave up 3 sacks and, of course, 2 costly ones on that last drive. But I kind of sort of count some of these false starts as 5-yard sacks, because that was the pass rush of Pitt and those edge guys influencing those false starts. So that's something that obviously needs cleaned up. When you talked about some of the more controversial calls, some of it you can do something about, some of it you can't. I did Sirius Radio the next morning, and the crew on Sirius Radio, completely detached, neutral observers, told me that Sean Martin getting flagged actually he got flagged for getting stomped on by the Pitt running back. So again, emotionally in charged environment, crazy atmosphere, and a rivalry game. Things aren't always going to break your way. And that doesn't mean the officials are out to get you. It just means they get caught up on some things too. They miss some things. But the penalties need cleaned up. You get double-digit penalties, that's going to need cleaned up like yesterday, okay? And then from a concern standpoint, the defense, we talked about this in the first handful of shows. For all the great things they did, and I am a firm believer in the defensive culture that Jordan Leslie and Shadon Brown have forged. And I think we have a defense that, to some respects, you can lean on. But if a unit is truly a strength of your team, you need to be able to hang your hat on that strength. Last year, for all the positive things they did, we were 1 possession away from perhaps a different outcome in College Park against Maryland, in Morgantown against Texas Tech, in Norman against Oklahoma. We didn't get that last stop with the chips down. That's what unfolded at Acrisure Stadium. We pinned them with a punter who was dropping dimes on the 8-yard line, okay? And a defense that had, going into the previous 2 series, Pitt had run 10 plays for 22 yards against that defense. So I'll tell you what, if you would have asked me, here's the situation, Jed, 6 minutes to go, game's on the line, Pitt's offense, after having 22 yards and 2 possessions, has to start on their own 8 to drive 92 yards to tie it. Sign me up every day of the week and twice on Sunday. And once again, it didn't materialize, in part because I'll get to here in a bit. Once we finish with the good from the game, we get into our pivotal moment. But go ahead, Wes.
That's certainly, that I think is, that moment and the unfortunate, hands with Bryce Ford Wheaton after him having such a dominant evening. Those are the two biggest talking points. Maybe we should go to some of the good here as well too, Jed. And I'll start with you on this one. JT Daniels at the top of that list.
Yeah, I mean, I only had concerns from a consistency standpoint in terms of what I'd seen this offseason. I didn't have concerns of him being overhyped. Not at all. I mean, you watch that kid for a short few minutes, you recognize as advertised. I mean, he will show you, if given a few minutes, what it's all about. But the consistency piece wasn't there. And of course, that's the last thing to come. And you haven't started a game since early last year. You haven't played in this offense or spoken this language in 3 years. So that's the last thing to come. You got to rep that out. But not only he's dead-eyed Dick with the football. I mean, he played under a lot of duress. It wasn't a clean pocket for the better part of the night. The offensive line gave him just enough time to get rid of it. Sometimes not enough time, and he had to make enough time. But he had his hands full. He's tough. He was taking shots to the mouth. I've always said it's part of your job as a quarterback. You sign up for this and you know the job description. My job is to trade shots in my mouth for free shots down the field. And it was very obvious to me that that's a trade that JT's happy to make. At halftime, we went into the locker room and I wanted to make sure I patted him on the ass and said, hey, great drive. That field goal drive was huge. I thought that was an instrumental drive and giving us a little momentum to close things out, really silencing, that student section. So I wanted to say something, just a quick comment to JT. I like to do that with the quarterbacks before they get to their business. Well, I looked over the quarterback section. Nico was there. Garrett was there. Goose was there. I couldn't find JT. And for about 10 minutes, I couldn't find him. And then finally up the corridor, I saw him with the medical staff. His arm was shredded. I mean, he was bleeding. If you noticed, he wore that sleeve in the second half. And that's not the only injury he suffered. I mean, he was taking shots all night. And he's tougher than a $2 steak. And again, he's got this bad rap about being injury prone. Well, I'm telling you what, he didn't look like he was made of peanut brittle to me the other night. Knock on wood, you don't know what tomorrow holds, but it starts with JT Daniels. The third down offense, we kind of knew this was something that could be exciting for us. And you know what? We put ourselves, normally, here's what's interesting about that. We converted 50% on third down, Owen. But we didn't really win on the early downs to get into manageable third downs as often as we'd like. Some of those were third and longs that we won on, okay? So once we start winning on first and second down with a little more consistency, you'll stay on schedule. And I would say we got a shot for hopefully that third down success to continue. The run game, you can't say enough about it. I mean, again, Pitt is the real deal. As much as I hate them, they are a bona fide, truly nasty front seven with NFL talent. Well coached, they chop that front up, their stunts, their twists. It's a lot to handle. And the fact that we ran for 190 yards against that group and CJ Donaldson, I mean, how can you not get excited? Again, I remember watching high school tape on him a year ago and having conversations with Travis Trickett. John Antonic and I have said, we talked about this, Travis Trickett, that's the gift that Travis has given us before he moved off to South Florida, right? But CJ Donaldson is a special, unique talent. We looked at him coming in as a Swiss Army knife, could do a lot of things, but he has too much potential to not keep him out of the backfield. And we're obviously going to see more of that. Special teams, let's not give them short shrift here. Start with CJ Donaldson, the blocked punt. Okay. We knew going in, Pitt had a new snapper and a new punter. They lost the 4-year starter at punter. So they weren't going to be synced up. Their timing was going to be off. That was something that our special teams units had talked about, discussed during camp. We knew we'd have an opportunity there, and we made the most of that opportunity with the blocked punt. Grotehouse, we talked about what he would bring from a field position, hidden yardage standpoint. We won the starting field position by a yard. And normally when Neil wins that, we win the game. Okay, part of that was Grotehouse. When's the last time we kicked a couple touchbacks and had such success on the kickoff coverage team? And then Oliver Straw, another guy that was much heralded coming out of Australia, but when he showed up at Morgantown, you're kind of like, is this going to work? Is it? You saw the potential, but you didn't know if it was going to click and come together. And slowly but surely, over the arc of time through camp, he started to gain more confidence from the staff. And not only did he drop dimes and pin them inside the 20 a couple crucial times, but Owen, he got us out of a couple holes. And the last thing I'll say, and I'll pitch to you because I want to hear you're good. When I look at the depth we demonstrated on the defensive line, I was very happy with that. I mean, this unit came together and influenced or made 5 sacks, but we were shuffling some bodies. And one of the things Pitt did was they were having some struggles in their tight end room. So they had to go big and a couple times go with an additional offensive lineman, as Neil touched on, sometimes even a couple extra offensive linemen on the field. So we had to swell up defensively and throw some meat in there as well to counter that. And I don't know if we were built in the past. I don't know if our roster was constituted to have an answer like that. But with the addition of a nose guard transfer, weighs in at 317, with Jordan Jefferson having the offseason he had, 310. I liked the strength and the depth of the D line and the speed at linebacker. We're not real deep at linebacker, but the speed with those guys on the field. When you look at, we know Lance Dixon runs like a scalded dog, but I'll say this. Lee Coba, one of the things I look for in a Mike Backer, I like total tackles. How many assisted tackles? Because you know what that is? That's somebody that sees the rest of the herd, gnawing down on a carcass and still says, I want my bite. I'm getting my piece of that carcass. And he battles to get there. So we had 5 assisted tackles, 5 unassisted. The speed, what I saw that was different versus last year or 2 years ago, especially last year without Tony Fields, when they tried to push things to the perimeter or the ball bounced outside, Owen, our linebackers took the air out of it right now, And again, last year, I don't think we were built to do that, but Lance Dixon loved the speed. Jared Bartlett loved the speed at the bandit spot, okay? And Lee Coba, one game into it, his energy on the sidelines was incredible. Guys, when he threw that minor helmet on, the turnover helmet, after recovering that fumble, it's almost like it was made for him. He is just so full of energy and bouncing off the walls. But, Owen, what was good about the game to you?
Well, it's kind of hard to top what you just said there, Jed. I mean, you basically covered it all. No, I'll hit on a few points. Like I said, I called you the other day and we spoke briefly on, well, it wasn't even briefly. We talked for a while, but JT, outstanding. I was so thrilled to see him be him. We talked about that the week before. Just be you, man. And it was nice to see that. That's something that we've kind of obviously been missing here at West Virginia. I can reiterate on his throws. I mean, the back shoulders were beautiful. You couldn't get no better. I mean, he put the ball where it needed to be. It was absolutely excellent. Third downs, we got to get those third and shorts. Definitely need to, play calling, getting those runs, chunking away 1 or 2 more on the average for sure. CJ, I couldn't have been happier. Big boy freshman, 240. We had spoken about arm tackles, right? Our two guys ahead of him, little too much dancing for my liking. I know this is a good, but I would like to see them just kind of hit the hole a little bit harder. And then once they get to the second level, put on the moves, put on the dancing shoes. We spoke about this again the week previous, special teams. As you just pointed out, I mean, big plays, special teams wins ball games. In the field position battle, you have to win it. You have to win it. That is make it hard, right? Don't want to make it easy for them in those situations. We got some new guys in the offseason, did a stupendous job, I thought, all night. And man, seeing all 11 hats run to the football on defense, that gets me fired up. All right. Not only in the sense of just, making the tackle, but being in the right place at the right time. When your team practices that, when you force that emphasis on that defense, for some reason, and it's just how it works, right? When you're around the football, things happen, right? And when everybody's around the football, all those mistakes those other teams make are those big plays and emphasis that you can capitalize on. And I'm going forward. Like I said, I was hyped before, but after seeing this game, big potential, big atmosphere. Um, I thought we did an excellent job with the things we did good. We have some cleanup, obviously, but going into next week, I'm very proud, very happy, and excited to see what's going to happen on Saturday.
How about some pivotal moments here, gentlemen, as we kind of parse through all the good and the bad? Pivotal moments brought to you by High Street Prints. Make sure you visit our friends at High Street Prints at highstreetprints.com. We're going to have some merch for you here before too much longer. Maybe some shirts and some hats and some ITG apparel, if you will. So make sure you're checking out High Street Prints at highstreetprints.com. If it's all right with you guys, I'll go first on this one on pivotal moments here, and I'll leave. I figured we might, and I don't even want to call them low-hanging fruits. I mean, they're two certainly pivotal moments, biggest moments. If you guys want to discuss the 4th and inches and the decision to punt there a little bit more, if we want to talk about the unfortunate, drop to interception with Bryce Ford Wheaton in that sequence at the end. How about this, though? Here's my pivotal moment for you. 4th quarter after the punt, right? So there's 5 minutes, 45 seconds left after the punt, after Pitt runs their first play, which was a 2-yard run. So you've got them in 2nd and 8, right? You get them pinned inside the 10. First play, they only get 2 yards, 2nd in distance. So far, so good. Keaton Slovis, short pass, Rodney Hammond Jr., 6 yards. You force a 3rd down there, right? Got him just where you want him, but you get the personal foul penalty, the targeting on Wesley McCormick. He's ejected, 15 yards, fresh set of downs for Pitt. So not only do you lose another defensive back when you were already down Charles Woods, but you were where you wanted them. You got them pinned. You got them held to 3rd down, but all of a sudden they get 15 yards. They get out of the shadow of their own end zone. They get a fresh set of downs. All right, fine. We're still in good shape here. They still got a long way to go. But then on that ensuing 1st down, 5 minutes left in the game, it's the catch that was to Reese Smith's catch that wasn't. Gavin Bartholomew, the tight end for Pitt, his only catch of the game, 9 yards. I don't think that was a catch. I don't think any of us think that was a catch. And if Reese Smith's wasn't a catch, this certainly wasn't. But it's earlier in the game. It's not as crucial of a moment. It's reviewed. It's not confirmed, but it's just upheld. Key difference there, right? So it's 2nd and 1. Pitt gets a 1st down on that 2nd and 1. So instead of what should have been an incomplete pass in 2nd and 10, Pitt all of a sudden now has 2nd and short. They get the 1st down with a 2-yard run. They get a fresh set of downs. So again, when you should have had them in back-to-back 3rd down situations, they, I would argue, get bailed out in both of those. And then what are the next 3 ensuing plays after Pitt gets bailed out of 2 3rd down situations? Next 3 plays, 20-yard pass completion, 14-yard pass completion, 24-yard pass completion. That, to me, is my pivotal moment right there. Rightfully so. We've talked a lot about Bryce Ford Wheaton and that unfortunate situation at the end that led to the pick 6. Rightfully so. We've discussed and argued ad nauseum over the last 3 days about should you or shouldn't you in terms of that 4th and inches, literally inches there in terms of running the football. But for me, everything was still going according to plan. You had them pinned inside their own 10-yard line. You held them to a 3rd down, but an unfortunate penalty gives them a 1st down. Then, when you should have had them in a 3rd down situation, all of a sudden a short 2-yard run gets Pitt a 1st down, and then they gash you for 3 huge plays, 20 yards, 14 yards, 24 yards, and end up tying the game there with 3 minutes and 41 seconds left. That, to me, is my pivotal moment. Even with the punt there, you had all the momentum in the world and just some unfortunate in terms of the targeting call, in terms of the upheld catch, and then 3 huge plays by Pitt. And just like that, you went from having them right where you wanted them to a tie game, and that crowd was back in it and juiced, and all the energy in that place was picked up. So there's a lot of different pivotal moments from that game, certainly. But that was it for me, and one that I felt was kind of flying under the radar. Those 3 huge chunk plays from Pitt in a row after you get some unfortunate officiating and some unfortunate video review there. That, to me, was the pivotal moment when everything, unfortunately, started going Pitt's way at the end there.
Well, I have to call an audible, Wes, because my pivotal moment was the Wesley McCormick play, uh, which spawned everything you just said. Okay. To me, that was crucial because it was a double whammy. You're already down what I would argue is the best corner in the Big 12. But now you're down as backup as well while you're tacking 15 on. So let me pivot, and I'll say that, and maybe this is the low hanging fruit that we were trying to avoid, but the Charles Woods injury was a pivotal moment. Now, I don't think I appreciated at the time just how pivotal, and that's not to say he's again, is in my estimation, if not the one of the best corners in the Big 12. Uh, he's going to bring value every week, irrespective of the matchup, right? But I kind of figured Pitt was going to be so hell bent on trying to run the football, they'd find some success in doing it. I thought they'd be a two-dimensional offensive football team. But after seeing what unfolded and the fact that we throttled or bottled Pitt up and kind of stuffed them, 76 yards on the ground, they averaged 2 yards a carry. If you had told me that was going to happen, and we did have Charles Woods on the field with that happening, now the dynamic's completely different. Now all of a sudden you're kicking your coverage to the other corner with Charles Woods on the backside. Good luck for your 3 Bills plus, Keaton Slovis. This is a 2 or 3 touchdown game, but I didn't know that at the time. It's just I assumed Pitt would have a little more success in striking the balance that Cignetti wanted to strike. But this is as good an opportunity as any. Before I toss to Owen, I'm going to address at least my take on the 4th and 1. Okay. You know where I was standing as we approached the ball? I was standing behind the yardstick. Okay. Deep enough, the official was in my way. I'd look over his shoulder. I'm behind the official holding the yardstick. That's what I was doing. So I was, I don't know, a yard, 4 feet behind him. Okay. You probably see my feet on a lot of the shots. Okay. And I'm looking over. Now, first of all, the yellow line is not just official. It's wildly unofficial. It's not just unofficial. It's wildly unofficial. So the ball, I'm not sure it was a yard, but it sure wasn't an inch. It was much closer to a full yard, just for posterity's sake. Not that even matters, okay? But I mean, from Louis Riddick on down, because I was asked, Louis Riddick called that 4th and an inch. Was it really an inch? I'm like, no. I'm sure people are going to freeze frame pictures and text them to me and tweet them to me. I've seen the pictures, and I was standing there. First of all, the orange flag behind the official was a broad flag. I'm telling you, at the point of the stick that we had to reach was closer to a yard. That's what I'm telling you. Whatever the angles of the pictures, whatever they might be, I was standing there. I've spent way too much time talking about that. Okay. Now, should we or shouldn't we? Okay. We talk with Scott Frost's decision to onside kick against Northwestern. Look, when you either roll the dice or don't roll the dice, okay, there's 2 sides to that coin. And when it comes up snake eyes and it doesn't work out for you, it's always going to be the wrong decision. It's only the right decision when you win the game. Okay. It's all about playing the odds. Football is a game of playing the odds. And I don't just mean when you get into the analytics of it, but so there's a lot of things to consider here. First, we had a punter who's dropping dimes. So what kind of chance did he give you to pin them inside the 10? Your defense, I touched on it before. In the previous 2 drives, it's almost like our defense was cresting, playing its best football of the night at that point. 22 yards in 10 plays, including a couple sacks, and they were revved up and throttled. And there was no reason to believe they wouldn't continue that. So you got a punter who you firmly believe is going to pin him. Okay. He's punting incredibly accurate footballs the better part of the night. A defense that's lathered up and you think is ready to go. So now you weigh the consequences. Okay, do I, don't I? If it doesn't work, because yes, we've had success running the football, but unlike the success we've had running the football, Pitt's now going to mug up the front with their defensive talent and say, oh, we know that you ran the football and we thought you might run it or throw it, but now we're telling our NFL talent it's coming between the tackles right here. That's different. So, for instance, the 44-yard run we busted with CJ, they were on what we call a 4-3 underfront. Okay, it's a different look with the nose guard shaded weak, the 3 technique to the tight end side. They're playing different gaps, and they got different games going on at behind back with Gervasier Dennis, okay? What Pitt was doing when we lined up on that 4th and 1, they were mugging both A gaps with their D tackles. They weren't in an underfront, okay? They were in a much different front. But you want me to poke holes in my own theory here? Yes, it was a much different front. They were getting ready to pinch, okay, and try and throttle anything down that came between the tackles and smother it out right now. It's the same front they were in when we scored on the quarterback sneak. They mugged up both A gaps there with JT. So it's not, but again, to me, this was longer, even by a couple inches or a foot. It was longer, but it's not as though we didn't have some success on third one. Again, retrospect is hindsight's 2020. Okay. We're just fleshing this entire thing out and thinking of all the angles. Okay. So now is Neil Brown a guy whose pedigree suggests, oh, he's never going to roll the dice or take a chance? I showed you guys a clip before we started the show against Clemson in 2016 on the road, 4th and 1 at his own 34. He went for it. Okay. And it worked. At that point, he ran a jet sweep for 66 yards to Javier Fry. So Neil Brown had success at Troy by taking those types of chances, calculated risks. And there's times at West Virginia he's taking calculated risks. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. So I think in retrospect, what I might have done, and Owen, this is kind of what I told you, but I've had, 2+ days to think about it, right? Nobody values timeouts, especially second half timeouts. I mean, I am a self-professed time management geek. I mean, that might be my favorite part of the game of football is clock management. I mean, that's weird. I get it. Okay. It's the old quarterback in me that I love that part of the game. So nobody covets timeouts more than me, and they grow even more valuable in the second half. That might have been a circumstance where I would have taken a timeout. I would have got the offense in the huddle, and I'd have looked at Zach Frazier and said, your call. 4th and 1, team-led team. We're looking for an answer here. You pushing these guys around, they're going to plug the A gaps, they're going to mug things up. It's not going to be the same front we've been gashing them on, CJ. It's not going to be the same look we've had the success pushing downhill on them. It's going to be a much different front specifically designed to take the air out right at the point of attack, which we haven't faced a lot tonight, okay? Can you guys push that front around and give me a yard on it? So, I mean, that's to contemplate, it crosses your mind. Okay, well, Garrett brings a different dimension. Maybe you bring Garrett on the field. I'm not comfortable taking JT Daniels off the field on the most critical play of the game, no matter what his role is or isn't. So criticism's fair. It didn't work. And anytime something doesn't work, the criticism's always going to be warranted or fair. But as I said in the earlier segment, I thought Neil did a pretty good job of at least explaining his thought process. I mean, defense was lathered up, stuffed them the last 2 possessions. It seemed like we were getting better and they were starting to sag. Defensively, we were starting to peak. Hey, my punter's accurate as all get out tonight. He's going to pin you. Can you drive the length of the field on this defense? I don't think you can. That's what I'm rolling the dice instead of you stuffing the gaps at the midfield and all of a sudden it's a TFL and the crowd's energized and charged up because you just knocked us for a 2-yard loss because somebody leaked through an A gap. That was his thinking, the way he explained it. Is it right? It didn't work. So when it doesn't work, it's always wrong. That's how coaching works. But that's my take on things. So I'm not emphatic about what in the world are you doing? I'm not emphatic about that. But at the same time, I'm not on the other side of it either. This is the type of thing you got to be methodical, and you're playing the odds one way or the other. But I don't mind the idea of getting my O-line involved and saying, look, this is going to be a different challenge than what we've seen most of the night when we were gashing them. Okay, they're going to mug up these gaps, unlike they've done most of the night. Is that something that you guys feel you can get some push against? Maybe so, but that's my take on it. Again, I'm not trying to take up for Neil. I'm not trying to do anything. I'm just saying, look, be open-minded about this. And I've seen people say, well, if you can't get a yard in Power 5 football or an inch, they've said an inch, it's not an inch. In Power 5, whatever the case might be, okay, you should be, an argument can be made that you should be able to make those critical plays in those critical situations. And there's been times in the past when Neil's teams did that, but he felt the odds were more in favor of us under these circumstances doing what we did. Now, things worked out the way we would have hoped up to the point that we pinned them, but we didn't get to stop. Everything else happened differently. So there we are.
Yeah, Jed. I mean, I'm just kind of just play off a little bit of what you said. Everything's a calculated risk. Those coaches go into these games They've studied the film. They have their GAs with the numbers is incredible. I mean, third down and short, third and long, fourth and short, fourth and long. I mean, they have their cheat sheets out there. They obviously did his research. Neil knows what he's doing. He's a great coach. He's a great thinker. Um, I'm sure there were talks about going for it. And I do like the aspect of what you were saying. Hey, how are you guys feeling? You want to do this or not? I mean, I was in a similar situation in the Sugar Bowl, right? We're sitting there with a fourth down situation, and we run a fake punt. Am I saying that's what they should have done? Absolutely not. That's not what I'm saying. But that was the last game of the season. This is the first game of the season, right? So all calculated risks. He said, she said, coulda, shoulda, woulda. I think it was a smart play, really, in the grand scheme of things, just knowing what we were going to do, right? We're on fire on special teams. Unfortunate situation. To recap what you guys said about the targeting call, didn't really think he led with the crown of his head. I really hate that. I hate targeting, right? I wish it was like a warning with maybe a sit out of a quarter, right? And then unless it's a flagrant penalty, right? A violent contact. But honestly, there's so many plays in the game. Obviously, I was bringing up Bryce's here a little bit earlier, but that's at the end of the game when everything's already on the line and everything's happened. There's so many plays that happened throughout the game that could have put us in a situation where we weren't even in those situations. So, hindsight's 2020. You can go back and look at it. Hey, we lost. Let's get over it. Let's move on. Let's get better. Let's fundamentally work on what we need to work on and go into this week and expect the W.
So let me take the listener side, the fan side on this one, right? Because you're both. I've enjoyed listening to this. You could tell you both played the game. You guys you're the football experts on here. You're the signal caller. You're the runaway beer truck with the NFL experience.
And we need to hear what you're going to say. We for sure.
I think the listener perspective on this and why there's been such a large outcry about specifically the fourth and inches, the 4th and 1, the 4th and half a yard, whatever we're going to call it, right? Moments. As a fan, you're looking for moments. I think particularly as a WVU fan, where, hey, I'm not breaking any news here, fellas. We're not Alabama. We're not Ohio State. We're not Oklahoma, right? You're looking for when you have an opportunity on a national stage in a big game to go and seize that opportunity, to go and seize that moment, because it doesn't happen every day, every week, every season when you're WVU. I think a lot of people, they remember what Owen said in that Fiesta Bowl and the Ball's decision to run the fake punt and put the game away there. They remember Dana Holgerson on the sideline in Austin looking at Will Greer and saying, you want to go win the game? Let's go win the effing game. And you go for 2 there, and they cheat you. You complete the 2-point conversion to Sills, but they cheat you and they make you do it again, and you still get it when Will Greer runs it in the end zone. Like, F you, we're kicking the door in, right? I'm sure fans remember the last backyard brawl in 2011 in Morgantown, my junior year of college, when it's 4th and 6, and Dana decides to go for it at the end of the game with 5-6 minutes left there, and he finds Gino finds Tavon Austin, I believe it was, over the middle to convert the 4th and 6 to keep the drive alive to go win that game. You want these moments, and we haven't had a ton of these moments over the last few years, right? There's been some nice wins in Neil's tenure, without a doubt. There's been a few ranked wins in there as well too, but there hasn't been a moment that would have been like that 2-point conversion in Austin, Texas. There hasn't been a moment that would be like faking a punt at the end of the Sugar Bowl to put the thing away and win it. There hasn't been a moment like being in your opponent's stadium on a Thursday night game with the entire country watching, and you convert a 4th down and you put that thing away and you just shove it right down their throat, right? You just kick the door in. I understand, believe me, I was there and I was screaming about it in the moment too. How are we not going to go for it here? the fans want those moments. The fans want those, we're grabbing this game by the throat and we're going to refuse to be denied. And I certainly understand the passion and the emotion and that side of things as well too.
Well, and again, to punch a hole in my own theory, the front was going to be much different, mugged up to stop anything that tries to leak through it all.
Maybe you go play action there and try and really put the game away.
Much different than the underfront. But the front was mugged up on JT's. In other words, it was when you go back and watch JT sneak. I mean, there's so many things going on something even as simple as a sneak. Servassier Dennis knew a sneak was coming. Okay, so what he tried to do was time it up and basically horse collar JT before he got any forward. He leaped over top of Zach. Okay. And he tried to grab a hold of JT. Well, Zach, just as he's snapping the ball, reaches up and kind of elevates him with his arm, just enough nudging him out that he can't get a clean grip on JT's jersey to hold him back, or JT might not have scored. I mean, that's one of 30 things going on when you analyze the tape, but they were mugging the A-gaps on that play, and we scored, okay? So it's not to say it's an impossible task. I'm just pointing out it's a different task than to just absentmindedly march into it and say, hey, we're running the ball effectively, run the ball. There's more to it than that.
Oh,
that's
absolutely.
not to say you can't do it.
Yeah, I don't think you're being an apologist or anything.
No,
I wanted to make sure that we kind of gave credence to just the emotional fan charged up. Let's go punch them in the mouth and win this thing.
And you know what? That makes sense. And all the things that have run through my mind after the fact, I thought max protecting in a one-man route to KP or to Bryce, wherever the case might be, and let GT just throw one of those beautiful deep balls.
Maybe you get a pass interference call downfield too.
Yeah. In a normal game you might, but I mean that could happen. But you also wonder, okay, well, against this pass rush, next thing you know, Baldonado sneaks past our tackle and he sacks you on that play action pass. And now they get the ball at your 42 and you are the dumbest coach ever born, So bold moves take bold risks, right? And that's part of what it wasn't bold as much as it was calculated. If you're going to say it's bold, you can only say it was bold and that it was probably in the minority what Neil did. In other words, most fans wouldn't want that. So you can only call it bold in saying you're doing what most people don't want. Other than that, it was calculated, right? It was calculated, but he's not one of these guys who's just tied to or married to the analytics at all. I mean, he's going against the grain at some key points analytically. But in that circumstance, I'm not even quite certain what the analytics said, to be honest with you. I'm not sure. Maybe that's a circumstance the analytics said to go for it. I didn't see the analytic report last.
I saw a breakdown. That the result that they got versus the result that they could have had. Okay, yes. So getting a first down, you run the ball and you get 2-3 yards and you get a first down and a fresh set of downs versus pinning them inside the 10 like WVU did, about even in terms of your win probability there.
And the analytics report, I've looked at those things before, and it is incredible how specifically driven they are and specifically tailored they are. They're tailored for you as a team. So in other words, you don't just pay for some service.
Right.
And they give you the same data. Hey, you're getting the same data K-State. No, this is very specific to exactly what West Virginia does against what Pitt does. And every one of these weekly reports is different. But again, maybe the analytics, I don't know, Owen. Maybe the analytics told him to go for it there, and he went against the analytics to not go. I don't know the answer because I didn't see the report last week. But I can't say this enough. I'm not here to defend Neil, and Neil would want me here to defend him. Okay, nobody needs to defend Neil. All right, he made the decision that thought he put us in the best chance to win the football game. The punt worked out. Everything played out. We had him, as Wes talked about, in an off script and a long yardage situation. And then here comes the penalty, and the next thing you know, things start falling in their favor. But maybe if you rally the troops, and I'm a big guy, and find it out, and maybe it's the old quarterback in me. I always wanted to know what my hogs up front with their hand in the dirt felt. I always wanted to know that. And so maybe that's a conversation I have with Zach Frazier. Hey, how you boys feeling? Again, they're going to mug things up. It's not going to be that same front we've been ripping these runs off against. So when they mug up those A gaps, how you feel about it? What do you think? They're going to pinch in. It's going to be a much different look than we've been gashing. How you guys feel? You want to punch against it? I'm pretty sure I know the answer to what that would have been. But part of it is getting them involved. And so it didn't work. So when things don't work, of course, criticism is going to be attended to that as it should. That's part of coaching. That's why they get paid what they get paid. But we wish it would have worked. It didn't. It's not even like the play calling thing. I've always found it funny when fans criticize play calling only insofar as they think that what was called did work, so therefore what wasn't called obviously would have. That's not how this works, right? No, there's a million things you can call, and only a handful of them work, right? Mm-hmm. But that's not what this is. That's the criticism here is more justified and warranted. It's fair, and as you touched on, it would have been a moment for the ages, driven by momentum from the ages. Because had we cashed in and moved some bodies, some talented NFL bodies as they might be, that could have finished them off. But so could a 3 and out or another sack from the 8-yard line. But
yeah, honestly, when you really look at it, it was a smart play, and we just didn't capitalize on the rest of the half of the story. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Asking your defense asking Pitt to drive down, what was it, 92 yards? That's a feat in itself to be able to do that. And the way we were playing, in my opinion, we had the momentum like the entire game. I truly felt that watching the game. I felt like we were just always in control, even when we had things that didn't really go our way. But, Wes, honestly, as a fan, personally as a fan now of the team, I understand Neil's MO maybe, last year there were times, short yardage situations where I'm like, man, let's do something here.
Let's go assert our will, right? Yeah.
You know what I mean? Let's do something here. Let's show people who we are and what we're made of. But in the end, it ended up working out for us on the special teams aspect of it. We just couldn't capitalize on the back end, and then we have an unfortunate penalty, and then we see what ensues after that.
The last thing. Go ahead, Owen.
No, you're good. Like all I was gonna say was coulda, shoulda, wouldas, and that's football.
The last thing I'll say about this particular circumstance, and this would be an argument in favor of going for it. In other words, an argument in support of the voice of those fans that you were talking about, Wes. If we are going to get to where we need to be as a football team this year, we can't do it without the tip of the spear being the offensive line. And if that's the case, that circumstance would seem to dictate that, all right, if we're that kind of team and we're going to get there led by this crew, here's mission, number one.
Here's the first step in that journey.
Yes, and it might be they're one of the 2 or 3 best, if not the best front seven we'll face all year. They really are. Hate to give Narduzzi credit, but they really are.
Give it to Charlie Partridge, their defensive
give it to Charlie Partridge, their D-line coach. But if we're going to do the types of things, I think the big bodies at the point of attack on both sides of the ball, O-line, D-line, have to be the tip of that spear. And if that's the case, I don't care how good Pitt is defensively, and they are exceptional right there at the spot we're talking about. Maybe there's your answer. If the O-line is going to lead the way with the D-line, then moments like that, the O-line has to find a way to move those bodies. And that's, not to say they weren't given the opportunity to do it, but again, I'm not sitting there making that decision at flashpoint, right? So.
Well, they've certainly got another opportunity this weekend. One thing you can't do is let Pitt beat you twice. You gotta, as tough as it is, you gotta get that taste out of your mouth. You gotta look ahead to Kansas. You gotta get ready for the Jayhawks and in your first Big 12 conference game pretty quickly here in early September. We will have another podcast for you later in this week. Now that we're into the season, we'll be into our twice a week here. We'll have a recap episode and a preview episode. We will have that Kansas Jayhawks preview episode for you later in the week and tell you everything that we're looking for in previewing that one as we get ready for game number 2, Big 12 Conference Battle number 1. Gentlemen, some final thoughts and some comments here. If it's all right with you guys, I'll go first before I tee you guys up and we get out of here. I did want to say before I give my final takeaways, I was tailgating on Thursday, right? Again, voice completely shot, all these things. We started at about 12:30 down there on the North Shore on Thursday. Yeah, I mean, boys, I put in a shift, all right? That's all I can say is I put in a shift. I had at one point during the tailgate 2 brothers who came up to our tailgate, came and found me because I said here on the podcast we'll be in Red Lot 6. So big shout out, I wrote this down because I didn't want to forget it, to the Hunley brothers. They came up to me. They found me. They said, "Are you Wes Uhler?" They said, "We love the In the Gun podcast. We love it. It's great. We love you guys. All these things. We're big fans." So I wanted to give a big shout out to the Hunley brothers for listening, for making the trip up to Pittsburgh, for finding me and saying hello. Big thanks to those guys. That was pretty cool. Here's my 2 takeaways quickly. The first is we got to learn how to close out these tight games. You know, Jed, you kind of alluded to this. Maryland last year, Texas Tech last year, Oklahoma, Thursday night. When we get into these fights, when we get into these brawls, we gotta be the ones who learn how to land the kill shot, right? And programs like Oklahoma, they certainly know how to do that. Pitt, after what they endured last year, a lot of close victories over Tennessee and Virginia and UNC, right? And a lot of those were Kenny Pickett bailing them out, but they still had to win those games as a team. They learned how to close out tight games. They learned how to be the one to deal the fatal blow instead of the one absorbing it. This team clearly still has to learn how to do that, and hopefully we'll see that transpire this season. That's my first takeaway here. The second one, too, is much simpler, much more 30,000 feet view. I just want to, as a program, play teams that make me feel things again. That game on Thursday, that brought back so many emotions that I hadn't felt in 11 years. I'm already looking forward to playing Virginia Tech again in a couple weeks because of that and hopefully getting some of that bad taste out of our mouth. But what Thursday night taught me above all else is that is the lifeblood, that is the essence of college football, playing regional teams that make you feel things. So I don't know if it happens in 2 years or in 20 years, but I hope we get back to the point where every single year Pitt and Virginia Tech and Virginia and Syracuse and Louisville and Cincinnati and Miami and Boston College, programs that make me feel things, fan bases and teams and logos and mascots and head coaches that make me feel things. Of all the good, of all the bad, of all the ugly, and everything in between, the one thing I don't want to miss from Thursday night is that's what college football's supposed to be. I want to get back to that. I want to play teams that stir that emotion inside of me, and obviously Pitt's at the top of that list.
Well, Wes, I can't wait to drink a beer with you, brother.
Yeah, that's the best news of the week right there.
3.15 million viewers. I'm reading from an ESPN PR tweet. Thursday night's brawl delivered. The most watched ESPN Thursday game in 5 years. College Game Day was up 30% from the last opening Thursday show with 900,000 viewers. So there's an appetite for this. And echoing what you said, Wes, it stirred those old feelings in you. But I think as the premier game that all the land was watching from sea to shining sea, I think does it serve a reminder to the college football fan base at large throughout this great country. Wow, this is what we can't let go. This is what we got somehow, some way, with all the realignment and the shifting. This is what needs retained. Games like this game. We don't need more UCLA at Rutgers. We need this. And I think that's what made it such a national story, such the national story that it was. And the fact that we could march into an environment like that, such an emotionally charged environment against a quality football team, a defending Power 5 champion. We hate their coach, but I tip my cap. They're a good football team, and that defense is nasty, okay? And walk away. The scoreboard didn't reflect it, but I'm telling you what, Narduzzi has to be hoping we're a heck of a football team, because I kind of sort of think we might have a better team than they think. We just couldn't show it on the scoreboard. So there's a whole lot to build on. And we got us a gunslinger, guys. We got us a gunslinger, you know. So when the chips are down and things get ugly, something tells me after the pick six, the look on his face, I'm telling you, it was 2:59. And then I heard his post-game comments. And this explained the look on his face. When the adversity ratcheted up further, he was smiling like the dog sitting at the butcher's table. I mean, he wanted it. And after the game, his response was, yeah, it was a pick six. They took the lead. And in effect, I'm paraphrasing, but it makes for an even greater story now. This is an even better story that we can write now. That is the way great players view the game. That is the way great quarterbacks view the game. That is the way JT Daniels views the game.
Big O, final word?
Yeah, stoked, man. Like we said, it's unfortunate that the score didn't reflect what we wanted to happen, but a lot of good things I saw on the field, and a lot of passion. Jed kind of filled me in on when Bryce went into the protocol tent to see when he got dinged up. And one of the comments Jed had made was, he was saying, get me the hell back out there.
Yeah. Twice they were checking him to see, is he going to protocol or not? I mean, they were cheating. His head was a whack-a-mole that whole fourth quarter.
Yeah.
He just wanted back out there.
Yeah,
he didn't go into protocol. He was cleared. So
yeah, and you want to see guys like that, and you want to see teams like that, and you want to see the atmosphere. Wes, I'm with you 100%. I want to see the passionate games again. That's what college football has always been about, and that's what I'd like to see it get back to. But some unfortunate things that happened, but some really great things that did happen, and I know for a fact those coaches, those players are getting after it. They're going to come to play on Saturday, and we're going to have a great start to this Big 12 season, and I'm looking forward to it. Like I said, Wes, can't wait to chug a beer with you. Dred, we might chug one, maybe two. But I'm looking forward to us linking up, getting together, and I'm looking to have a great season, man. This is good. This is going to be some good stuff if we capitalize on the great things we did, fix the mistakes. We're going to be a hell of a ball club this year.
I think that's well said. I think that's a good way to wrap it up, and we'll see how the boys respond starting Saturday, the home opener, the 10th, 6 p.m. against Kansas. Like I said, we'll have a full breakdown for you of that one later on in the week. Be an ear, tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast here. Make sure you're following along on all of our social media channels at In the Gun Podcast, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Subscribe on YouTube if you want to see our beautiful mugs and Owen's luscious beard and everything. And we're just getting rolling here. Like I said, now that we're in season, 2 episodes every week, recap episode, preview episode, and we'll talk to you guys in just a few days here for a little Kansas Jayhawks preview. For Owen Schmitt, for Jed Drenning, I'm Wes Uhler. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you later in the week. This is ITG.